Before I show you the next part of the tutorial on how to make the electronic dice, I want to review a couple of the components. The first one's a resistor. Now you remember that a resistor is something that slows down or reduces the amount of electricity going through the circuit. You can imagine this as being a hose where the water's trying to get through and there's either something blocking it or something being put in it in the way to reduce the flow, a bit like a tap. So in this case we have a hose and what happens is if we put a resistor, a big resistor in there, we're reducing the amount of flow so that a little bit of the water gets through. If we change the resistor so it's smaller, there is less resistance and therefore more water gets through. So in fact we're helping reduce the amount of current that goes through into the components. The next component I want to look at is a capacitor. I'm going to let this gentleman tell you all about them.
Now I'll tell you what they're for and what they do. Now capacitors come in all shapes and of course all sizes. And capacitors store tiny amounts of electrical charge. A bit like a battery. Now I know what you're saying. This seems really impractical, doesn't it? But capacitors are really useful and in this video you'll see why. Now first up I'm going to show you an example of how a capacitor stores an electrical charge. So what I've got here is an ordinary battery, an ordinary capacitor, and an ordinary motor with a bit of tape stuck on it so you can see if it's turning. So firstly I'll charge the capacitor with the battery. Okay, that should be enough. Now I'm going to connect it to the motor. There you go. When I've connected up the motor, the capacitor could then release all its energy and power the motor for about a second.
The next one we need to look at is called the diode. Now remember, a diode makes the electricity flow in one direction. Again, I'm going to let somebody else tell you all about that.
Here's the schematic symbol of a diode and a picture of the real thing. The little stripe on the end of the diode tells you which way to put it in your circuit. But what is a diode? A diode is a device that only allows current to flow in one direction. A helpful way of remembering this is to compare diodes to water valves that only allow water to flow one way.
The last component I want to look at is a transistor. You could think of this a little bit like a hose with a nozzle on the end. The more pressure you put on the handle, the more water that comes out. So in a transistor, the more electricity that goes through one leg, the more power or electricity that comes through the circuit.
Okay, the next thing we're going to put in is our remaining diodes. These two diodes will go perpendicular to the last diodes that we put in, and they're just going to go above them, and making sure that the black line is now facing the right, making sure that the side with the big hole in it is the top. So we're just going to put them in.
The next part we'll need to work on our electronic dice is another resistor. This one with the lines orange, orange, red on it. This one goes in the very bottom. There's a bit of a lower hole than all the rest. Goes in there, and there's the one directly above it. It's a bit of about a centimetre or something, and so it doesn't matter what way you put this one in, so you just got to bend it so that it'll fit.
Okay, the next thing we're going to use is these two resistors. So make sure they've got brown, grey, red on them. I'm just going to pull them out. So these ones are going to go on either side of the one that we just put in with the orange, orange, red.
the last resistor, or the next piece you'll need, is another resistor, and it's the red. It's going to go in the very last two holes in the circuit board. So these two here, parallel to the other two that we just put in, or the other three that have just been put in. So it'll go, doesn't matter what way you put it, like the others.
The next component we'll need for the electronic dice is the button. The button will go next to the tall blue thing here.
The capacitor.
Yeah.
The next part we'll need for the electronic dice is an LED, or a light emitting diode. As you'll notice, one leg is shorter than the other. So when we put it into the board, we've got to remember that the large dot is the top, so we want the the shorter leg going facing down. Alright, so when we put these in, remember at this point we don't want to solder them in.
Cool. The other way to double check if your LEDs are in the right way, you notice that one edge has a flat part on the edge, and this should be facing towards the bottom of the circuit board. So just there's a flat edge on each of the LEDs.
Okay, we're going to need remember to get a plastic box and a metal template from your teacher, and the metal template will have the word up on it. So when we put it in, we want to make sure the letter up, the word up is on it. Then we get a nail and a hammer. We just slightly hammer all of the holes.
Remember when you're doing this to do it over a piece of wood so you don't damage the table.
Okay, so we want to take the template out now, and you'll notice that there's 8 holes where we've hammered the nails in. So we're going to drill there. Make sure you ask your teacher for the right size drill bit.
That's what it was. So once you've drilled the holes into your box, you want to get your circuit board. Got to push it so that the LEDs come through the 7 holes. And then you may need to push them through a bit. Like that, just so you can see them. And then when you solder, you may need to solder the ones on the outside and cut them to get to the ones on the inside, as you may find it a bit difficult just to solder the ones.
Yep.
Next we'll need the battery clip. What we're going to need to do is take the circuit board out, then we're going to need to drill a hole in the side, and we're just going to thread the black and red wires in. Then we're going to need to take it from the bottom and through the big hole up, and then we've got to make sure that the red wire goes to the top of the board, remembering that the big hole is the top, and then the black wire to this next one down.
And then solder.
And solder.
The final parts that we'll need for our electronic dice is the 2 integrated circuits that we left in the foam. So to put these in, you may need to get your teacher to do it, as they are very fragile. Once your integrated circuit board is in, give it to your teacher to check and make sure that everything is okay. If it is, get a battery, plug it in, and see if it works. Then you can get a pencil, push it, and it should work.